So let's review homework exercise number 3. In this exercise, we note that some of the following discourse passages are arguments. Identify those which are arguments, and for those which are arguments, underline the claim statement. Identify any cues or indicators that help you figure out whether the passage is an argument and which assertion is the claim. So number 1 says, since Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1964, more disabled Americans are in the workplace. So the question is this an argument? And if it is, which of the assertions here is the claim? One clue to look at is this word since. We have since over here. And since can sometimes function as an argument indicator. However, in this instance, since simply means since the passage of time, that is, since a particular period of time in the past, right? If this was an argument, since would tell us that the first assertion, Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1964, that would have to be the evidence, because since is from the because group of indicators. It would say evidence follows, right? Which means that the remaining assertion, more disabled Americans are in the workplace, would have to be the claim. But when you look at these two assertions together, if they are two assertions, right, you would have to be saying that the statement, Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1964, proves that more disabled Americans are in the workplace. And in fact, there's no evidence that supports that claim based on that kind of evidence. If this was an argument and you needed to prove that more disabled Americans are in the workplace, you would need to show something like, for instance, statistics comparing 1964 to the present day and showing that the number of disabled Americans in the workplace had increased, right? But in this instance, it's simply saying since a certain period of time in the past, something has happened. So it's actually one statement, not an argument, right? And so there's no inference making going on. Number 2, the inmates should be let out of jail. It is not their fault the coronavirus has threatened their health. So in this case, we have two sentences and also then two statements or two assertions. Which of these, if it's an argument, which of these functions as the claim? And in fact, this is an argument, and it is the first statement here that is the claim. It is a policy claim, as you can see. It has the word should. Inmates should be let out of jail. And the reason that's given, and whether we think this is a good reason or not is not really relevant, but there is a reason given, some evidence given in support of the claim. It's not their fault, that is not the fault of the inmates, that the coronavirus has threatened their health. Okay? Number 3. Several faculty members were stricken with the COVID-19 virus because asymptomatic students neglected to wear masks to class. So here we have one sentence, but the question is, do we have more than one statement or more than one assertion? And if we do, is this an argument? We can look closely at this potential clue, the word because. And we know that when because appears, it can sometimes indicate that evidence is present, and so inference making or arguing is going on. In this case, however, if that's what's happening, it would say that the evidence statement has to follow because, that asymptomatic students neglected to wear masks to class. And so you would be asking, in effect, does that serve as evidence to prove that several faculty members were stricken with the COVID-19 virus? And in fact, actually, that doesn't prove the claim, if it's a claim, right? You would need to have maybe medical reports that show the number of faculty who were ill or something like that. Rather, because here simply gives the reason why something happened. It doesn't prove that it happened. It only explains why it happened, right? So it's the other meaning for the word because, not indicating inference making or arguing, but rather simply offering an explanation. So it's the explanation for why several faculty members were stricken with the COVID-19 virus because asymptomatic students neglected to wear masks to class. So not an argument, simply an explanation of why the faculty members took ill, not proving that they are ill. Number 4, if it is true that President Trump won the 2016 election by trickery and deceit, then the election should be voided by the court. Now, in this case, it seems like this might be some kind of a political argument, and it seems to have two parts to it. We have if the President Trump won the election by trickery and deceit, and we have the part, the election should be voided by the court. But in fact, this is all one sentence, as we see, and it's also all one statement. It's a particular kind of a statement called a conditional. And we'll study conditionals later, but you'll note that conditionals have the if, then elements in them. And it doesn't say that the election was won by trickery and deceit. And it doesn't say the election must be voided by the court or should be voided by the court. It only says if the condition is true, then this other policy or other action should follow. Okay? It makes no assertion that, in fact, the election was won by trickery and deceit. It only sets up a condition under which that action would follow. So the whole thing together, the whole sentence, is a single statement. And because it's a single statement, it can't be an argument. We know that arguments must have a minimum of two statements or two assertions, one claim and one piece of evidence. Number 5, why do I insist that UNH is a great school? Just look at the unparalleled excellence of its faculty, the variety of cultural, athletic, and social opportunities, and the beautiful setting near the ocean, lakes, and mountains. So here, obviously, we have two sentences. The question, why do I insist that UNH is a great school? And the answer to the question, the statement that says unparalleled excellence of the faculty, cultural, athletic, social opportunities, beautiful setting, etc. Okay. Now we look at the first sentence and we say, well, that's a question. It doesn't seem to function as a statement, but clearly this is a question that implies a statement. The person who asks, why do I insist that the University of New Hampshire is a great school, obviously thinks that the University of New Hampshire is a great school. So in setting up that rhetorical question, there is an implied assertion, UNH is a great school, and the reasons then are given. So this, in fact, is an argument, right? And the statement is, the claim statement, I should say, is UNH is a great school. And then actually there's 3 pieces of evidence contained in the second sentence. We could say actually 3 assertions if you want. UNH has unparalleled excellence of its faculty. UNH has a variety of cultural, athletic, and social opportunities. And UNH has a beautiful setting near the ocean, lakes, and mountains. So lots of evidence given to affirm, to prove reasons for insisting that UNH is a great school. So let's look at number 6. The faculty union has called a strike because the administration refuses to bargain about health coverage. So here again, we can focus on this word because. We have one sentence, but we could ask, does because offer a transition from one statement to another? Are there 2 statements here, or is it a single statement, right? And if it's a single statement, it's obviously not an argument. So what's going on with because? Does this indicate inference making or arguing? Or is it like the previous example, right, which we had in number 3, which simply explains the reason why something is happening, all right? So let's read the sentence again. The faculty union has called a strike because the administration refuses to bargain about health coverage. Now, if this was an argument, it's the second statement, the administration refuses to bargain about health coverage, that would have to be the evidence because it's what follows because. However, we look at that evidence and it does not prove the fact that the faculty union has called a strike. Indeed, if you were walking around campus and you saw professors with picket signs, that would be an observable fact. You wouldn't need to prove that they had called a strike, but you might need to say why the strike was called. And that's what's happening in here in number 6, because it's simply an explanation for why the faculty union has called a strike. It's not proving that the faculty union has called a strike. So it's not an argument. It's a simple single statement that offers a simple explanation for why the strike is going on. But contrast this with number 7, which says the administration must be refusing to bargain about health coverage because the faculty union has called a strike. Now, again, we focus on the word because, and because would indicate here, if this is an argument, that the faculty union has called a strike would have to be the evidence, right? And indeed, if you saw faculty on a picket line, professors holding picket signs, refusing to go into academic buildings and the like, that would be an observable fact, and observable facts and conditions function as evidence, right? But what does that evidence prove? Well, if you go back to the first statement, the administration must be refusing to bargain about health coverage. We don't know for certain, and again, remember, argument always goes from what we know to what we don't know. We don't know for certain that this has happened, but we're speculating or concluding that the administration must be refusing to bargain about health coverage. And the evidence we're offering is, oh, look, the faculty has called a strike. So in fact, this is an argument because indicates the second statement here is evidence. And the first statement, the university must be refusing to bargain about health coverage, is the claim in the argument. Number 8, citizens have no faith in the government. The reason is that so many government officials are involved in corruption and scandal. So again, this is a bit tricky, and some of these are tricky on purpose. They're designed to get you to think slowly and critically about what's going on in each of the passages, right? Because we see here the reason is, and that might tell us this is an indicator of argument. And if it was, it would have to be, again, the second statement here, so many government officials are involved in corruption and scandal, is the evidence. That's what would follow an indicator like the reason is, right? Which means that the first sentence or the first statement would have to be the claim. Citizens have no faith in the government. But if you look at the alleged evidence here, the evidence doesn't actually prove that the claim is true, right? In fact, if you had evidence to prove citizens have no faith in the government, you would need to do some kind of a survey. Maybe you'd have statistics about public opinion regarding the government, and that might prove that citizens have no faith in the government. But this is taking that as a known or an understood truth and simply explaining why that is true. That is, that citizens have no faith in the government because so many government officials are involved in corruption and scandal. So this is, again, in two-sentence form, simply an explanation of why the first sentence is true, not proof that it is true. All right? Now we would contrast that with number 9. I don't think Chris Sununu is a good governor. My reason is that he refuses to invest more state support in the University of New Hampshire. So here we take the two sentences, and again, we have a very similar seeming argument indicator here, my reason is, but you notice the difference here. We are advancing an opinion, a value judgment in effect, a value claim in the first sentence. I don't think Chris Sununu is a good governor. That's obviously going to be a controversial claim. It's going to be a claim about which other people disagree. And so when someone advances an opinion like this that would be controversial, the expectation is that they would provide some proof or reason in support of it. And indeed, in this case, that's what's happening with the second sentence. My reason is that he refuses to invest more state support in the University of New Hampshire. That functions as evidence. You can go and look up maybe newspaper reports about the governor's budget, see that the University of New Hampshire funding has either gone down or remained the same, but not gone up, right? And so that's evidence in support of the opinion that the value claim, if you will, that Chris Sununu is not a good governor. So in this case, we do have an argument, and indeed, the claim is, I don't think Chris Sununu is a good governor. And then we move to number 10. I feel that violence on television should be restricted, as it has a negative influence on children. So this is one sentence, but it seems also clearly that it has two statements. Violence on television should be restricted, and violence has a negative influence on children. Okay? So notice here, should be restricted. That indicates this is probably a policy statement. So the question is this functioning as a claim and an argument? And indeed, this policy statement would be controversial. Not everybody would agree that violence on TV should be restricted. So we then get evidence why that policy should be put in place, because it has, or as, but as is the logical indicator here, right? As, that is, evidence follows, it has a negative influence on children. So this is an argument. It's a policy claim here. And the claim is, I feel that violence on television should be restricted. Now, don't be confused or distracted by the fact that we use the word feel, or that, as in number 9, it seems to be someone's opinion. Because again, we often argue in support of our opinions, and very often the opinions that we assert end up being controversial. People disagree with them, and so that opens the opportunity to argue, that is, to give reasons in support of our opinions. Number 11, Donald Trump will be remembered as America's greatest president due to the fact that he will achieve world peace and discover a clean, inexhaustible energy source during his second term. Okay? So this is a longer sentence, but obviously it contains at least two assertions, right? And it has a clear argument indicator, due to the fact that, right? And this indicator would tell us evidence follows. So the second assertion here, the second statement, he will achieve world peace and discover a clean and inexhaustible energy source during his second term, right? That is the evidence that is introduced. And so the claim, Donald Trump will be remembered as America's greatest president, is the claim of the argument. It's a predictive claim. We don't of course know that President Trump will even be reelected, but the person is predicting he will be remembered as America's greatest president, and is also making that claim due to the fact that he will achieve world peace and discover a clean and inexhaustible energy source during his second term. This is an instance, obviously, where even the evidence itself might be doubted. You know, we don't think there'll be world peace. We don't think there will be a clean and inexhaustible energy source, right, very soon. Be great if there was one or both of those, but we would probably want additional evidence to prove that there's likely to be world peace, or that there's likely to be a clean, inexhaustible energy source during his second term. But one of the things we can see, even in just this sentence, is that the first statement rests on the second statement. That is, that there's inference making going on. So if we accept that there will be world peace and clean, inexhaustible energy, then we will be more likely to accept that President Trump will be remembered as America's greatest president. Let's look at number 12 then. Donald Trump never served in the military. Therefore, he's unfit to be commander-in-chief. We see two sentences and also then two statements and the indicator therefore. And therefore would tell us, if this is an argument, that what follows is the claim, right? Because it's from the therefore category. The indicator tells us what follows is the claim, which means over here, the first statement we have what would function in this argument as evidence if it's an argument, okay? Now we look at Donald Trump never served in the military. That's either a well-known fact or something you could easily look up. Certainly functions as evidence, therefore tells us there's an argument or inference making going on, and we have an opinion here. He's unfit to be commander-in-chief. So this, in fact, is an argument, and the claim is he's unfit to be commander-in-chief. Number 13, civil liberties must be sacrificed in time of war or pandemic, right? Now, in this case, you have just a single assertion, and because there's only a single assertion, it cannot be an argument. It might be something that you would expect somebody to argue in favor of, that is to give reasons why this would be true, right? It certainly, as a statement, would function as a claim because it's controversial, right? But there's no additional statement given. There's no other argument, I should say no other assertion, so it can't be an argument. We don't see anything coming up after this to support the statement civil liberties must be sacrificed in time of war or pandemic. So by itself, the statement cannot be an argument. Number 14, marijuana will remain illegal in New Hampshire. University students tend not to vote in large numbers. Now this is peculiar. We have two statements, obviously, two assertions. And the real question is, because there's no obvious argument indicator here, the real question is there an inference possible between these two statements? That is, if we believe one, is it likely we'll believe the other? If it is an argument, right, it seems clear that it's the first statement that would function as the claim. Marijuana will remain illegal in New Hampshire. That's a kind of predictive claim. And the evidence given, university students tend not to vote in large numbers. It's possible, I think, to develop a chain of reasons, that is, an argument where one statement is connected to the other by inference, but it seems like also there's several steps missing in between. So I think to make this into an argument, you have to depend on members of the audience to actually fill in several inference steps between the statement university students tend not to vote in large numbers and marijuana will remain illegal in New Hampshire. So it would have to be something like, because students don't vote in large numbers, candidates who favor legalization of marijuana are not likely to get elected. Because those candidates are not likely to get elected, legislation legalizing marijuana is unlikely to be introduced into the state legislature. Because that's not going to happen, marijuana will remain illegal in New Hampshire. So there's a couple of steps between one and the other. I think if you said it was an argument, clearly this would have to be the claim, the first statement. But I think it's also fair to say there's probably more than one inference step that takes us from the evidence here to the claim. And then finally, number 15, the Patriots were right to allow Tom Brady to sign with Tampa, since it is clear they needed to begin the project of building the team of the future. Okay? So here we have one sentence, but obviously two assertions or two statements, and we have an argument indicator, since. And if this is an argument, since would tell us evidence is coming up. That is, evidence follows since. So that would mean the claim would have to be the Patriots were right to allow Tom Brady to sign with Tampa. Right? And if that's the case, then we would have obviously a value claim. The Patriots were right. That's making a judgment about the merit or worth of their decision. And then since tells us here's the evidence. So is this evidence? It's clear they needed to begin the project of building the team for the future. Does that give a reason to believe the Patriots were right in allowing Brady to sign with Tampa Bay? And in this case, yes, I think it does function as a reason. May not be a good enough reason for you, but the point is there's an inference possible here. The person making this argument would expect us to see a connection between the need to build a team for the future and the right decision being made in allowing Brady to sign with Tampa. So this is an argument, and it's the first statement that functions as the claim in the argument. So there's the review of exercise 3. If you have questions on any of the items here, post them to the discussion board. And keep in mind that some of these examples I made deliberately tricky just to bring up some of these concerns about reading carefully and noting how certain indicators could be read in a different way, right? So not every argument is going to be quite that challenging or quite that tricky, but this will give you practice in thinking slowly and critically about public discourse.